Hello, everyone. I'm the first negative speaker. I will be refuting what Atik had said. Atik's first claim of significance was essentially that the Electoral College and the circumstances under which the Electoral College was created have changed. Back when the Founding Fathers originally created it, communication was hard, travel was hard, it was impossible essentially to run an international campaign, a national campaign. And what Atik has argued is that technology and changes in roads, internet, things like that has changed that. And my first counter to that is that while technology has changed things, for example, you can communicate across the country, things have also become increasingly complex. The complexity level of managing 13 small states with little to no international relations, without having to fight 2 wars, is hugely different from managing, I think it's, 50 now? 50 plus, 52? I can't remember. Anyways, 50 plus states, multiple wars. While it's fair to say that technology has advanced and allowed better communication, this does not mean that the same issues, the lack of knowledge, the lack of understanding, has in any way changed. Debate-wise, put it best. The complexities of modern government require careful consideration of all the facts available, reports from all sides, scientific and rational analysis, a lack of knee-jerk reaction, and a willingness to consider the long-term solution and not put self-interest first. The majority of people do not have the time nor the inclination to make a rational, well-considered judgment on these facts. My second point is that while the internet has made interaction easier, there's still a huge amount of interaction between the state, the government, the people, and the federal government that needs to happen. You can't simply, to fully involve the people, you can't simply have to fully involve the people, you can't simply have one vote. You have to have a back and forth. There has to be communication. And this is, while not impossible even today with the technology, there's simply too many people, there's too many perspectives, there's too many answers, and honestly not enough knowledge, time, or money to create an effective two-way communication. Third of all, I think my last and final point about the direct election is that it's highly susceptible to lack of emotion, or lack of education and high emotions. When people get angry, when people get into something, politics is a very emotional business for most people, they tend to make less rational decisions than might be wise. Why is this important? Because while sometimes emotion can guide us into making good decisions, when you're dealing with something this complex that can have consequences far, far into the future, hundreds, maybe thousands of years, we need to take the time to time the effort to look at the possible consequences and not simply make a decision based on our emotion. What the Electoral College allows us to do is to filter out quick changes and shifts in emotion. It allows the emotion to still be heard, but it doesn't allow it to overwhelm the pure logic. As Mike McCarthy put from AS Politics Direct Democracy, there is evidence that referendum results can be skewed by voter ignorance, and as a consequence, the vote is not based on rational analysis of all evidence. Thus, we could expect that if referendum were held on capital punishment at the time of a high-profile murder case, the public would be unable to step back and consider the issue in hand. And this is hugely important. Passing a law about capital punishment simply because of one murder case that made the news sets a horrible precedent. This is not something we should allow to happen in any country, much less our own. Atik's second claim, an inherency claim this time, was that The electoral gives the states more power and distorts voter contribution, and tends to force battles into, or campaigning into, battleground states. Atik is correct. The Electoral College was never intended to provide completely and fair equal representation between the states. It is skewed. There's plenty of logic behind this. Is it fair that, say, California and New York were to decide the president or legislation for the rest of the nation? No, it's not fair. Yet, by a direct popular vote, those two places, Southern California and New York, could vote almost every other area down. According to Kimberling, the deputy director of the Federal Election Clearinghouse, in response to these arguments, proponents of the Electoral College point out that it was never intended to reflect the national popular will. As for the first issue, the Electoral College overrepresents rural populations. Proponents responded that the American Senate, with 2 seats per state, regardless of its population, greatly overrepresents rural populations far more dramatically. But since there's been no serious proposals to abolish the United States Senate on these grounds, why should such an argument be used to abolish the lesser case of the Electoral College? The Senate is the body that actually makes the laws. The Electoral College simply elects our face, our president. While he's important and he tends to set the tone, actual legislation, what decides whether marijuana is legal or illegal, what decides where you're allowed to drive, for example, what firearms you can own, that is the purview of the Senate, and that is much more important than the president. And if we're going to allow the Senate to be skewed so much by states, then why is this such a problem in the Electoral College?
You're out of time.
I'm done. Thank you.